The United States Air Force came up with the term UFO, unidentified flying object, back in 1953, and over time, it's come to mean anything that might hint at aliens trying to contact us. There's an actual field called ufology, dedicated to studying these kinds of things. But there's an unexpected twist. The authorities don't really like the term UFO anymore. Instead, they've switched to calling them UAP, which stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. It sure sounds more professional, doesn't it? It also kind of distances the term from decades of wild alien theories tied to UFOs. Now, if you're into UFOs or UAPs, this is actually a pretty exciting time. Back in December 2020, when the government passed a huge spending bill, there was a little clause tucked in there about UFOs. Basically, it called for more transparency and pushed agencies to share what they know. And shockingly, the CIA has recently dumped all of its declassified UFO documents online. That's 2,780 pages of material now available to the public, and you can find it all on a site called the Black Vault. It's run by John Greenewald Jr., a guy who's basically dedicated his life to collecting and sharing UFO-related info. But of course, getting those documents wasn't easy. Greenewald had to file over 10,000 Freedom of Information Act requests to pry them out of the government's hands. He says the whole process was like pulling teeth, and even now, the files aren't exactly user-friendly. They're in an outdated format, multi-page TIFF files, and the text scans are messy, making it hard to search through them. To help, Greenewald converted the whole collection into 713 PDFs. But even then, some of the documents were poorly photocopied, which made it tricky to dig into the details. Still, UFO fans have already uncovered some wild stuff. One document mentions a Bosnian fugitive claiming to have had contact with aliens. According to the document, at the time it was written, Radovan Karadzic remained alive, but the authorities didn't know where he was. The rumors of his near capture lacked evidence, and NATO countries blamed each other for failing to act. Critics saw the hunt for Karadzic as part of a political circus, with no real effort to bring him to justice. But the real question is whether they didn't want to, or just couldn't, because he wasn't on Earth anymore. Another document talks about mysterious explosions at midnight in a small Russian town. On the 12th of April, a powerful midnight explosion shook Sassovo, a small city in Russia's Ryazan region. The blast caused a lot of damage. It ripped off roofs, shattered windows, and rocked buildings like an earthquake. No one was seriously injured, but many people were shocked. Schools and kindergartens were closed, and buildings were temporarily patched with plastic sheeting. At the time when the document was written, the cause of the explosion was still a mystery. Theories ranged from buried World War II munitions, a falling air bomb, a meteorite, or a fiery UFO sighting reported by locals. Military experts suspected ammonium nitrate stored nearby, though this fertilizer had been safely used for years. A massive crater, 92 feet wide and 13 feet deep, was the only evidence of the disaster. One of the most intriguing finds is a 1970s document showing the Assistant Deputy Director for Science and Technology personally receiving some mysterious UFO-related info. But of course, like most government releases, a lot of the good stuff is blacked out. Greenewald still hopes and fights to get those redacted sections declassified. There must be something special about that information. As you see, digging into this data takes a lot of patience. You're basically wasting hours and hours of your life hoping to find something that stands out. But if you're still curious, check out the Black Vault. You might discover something mysterious and creepy in those thousands of pages. In the middle of the previous century, flying saucers were constantly making headlines. America was going through a surge of reported UFO sightings. So it shouldn't probably come as a surprise that the American authorities, namely the US Air Force, created a couple of short-lived programs. Those were Project Sign and Project Grudge, and their main goal was to look into that phenomenon. These programs were followed by likely the most famous of them all, Project Blue Book. It was a large-scale government study that lasted from 1951 to 1969. The initiator of this program was Major General Charles P. Cabell. He was a former intelligence director of the Air Force. Project Blue Book scrupulously gathered over 12,600 reports about people seeing bizarre, unidentified objects in the sky. After thorough research, it was determined that most of those had natural, quite mundane explanations. As for the rest of the reports, the members of Project Blue Book simply didn't have enough data to evaluate them. That's why support for their efforts dwindled. Officially, Project Blue Book was closed in December 1969. But apparently, it didn't make American authorities lose interest in UFO sightings. Because in mid-December 2017, the world found out that they had secretly launched one more UFO research program in the late 2000s. Accordingly to certain documents, American authorities spent around $22 million over a 4-year span on a project called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, aka AATIP. This project was started in 2007, and its main goal was to study UFO phenomena. Most likely, all this activity was triggered by the 2004 Tic Tac incident. That's when a few U.S. Air Force pilots spotted unidentified flying objects off the coast of California. They captured them on video. None of the pilots could figure out what these objects were. They behaved in a weird way, as if our laws of physics didn't apply to them. They were reportedly flying extremely fast and rotating in unpredictable movements. It looks as if after that incident, American authorities decided to investigate whether those objects could be identified or not. And if not, they were eager to know where they had come from and if they had been a threat. When the New York Times story about the new project broke, officials announced that the study had been terminated in 2012. However, there were people who claimed that the program was still ongoing. One of those was a military intelligence official running the program until they quit in October 2016. In any case, let's have a closer look at this mysterious program. Indeed, the areas of research funded by the project resembled things you could find in Star Trek. For example, one grant was for the study of traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy. This study was conducted by Eric W. Davis of EarthTech International, Inc. Another grant sponsored the research of invisibility cloaking. One more area of study included warp drive, dark energy, and the manipulation of extra dimensions. This research was conducted by a theoretical physicist and director of the nonprofit Icarus Interstellar. As we've already mentioned, all these studies received at least $22 million of funding, but this sum could have been much bigger. No one has revealed why or how these studies were given such huge grants under the AATI program. The results of the study aren't known publicly either. The criteria for choosing these fields of research could be that warp drives and stargates might be useful for extraterrestrial civilizations traveling interstellar distances to visit our planet. Still, some people are not amused that such questionable fields of study were receiving substantial government funding.
One of the biggest questions that has been torturing the minds of astronomers and common folks is, why haven't we found aliens yet? You'd think with a universe so big and filled with tons of stars and planets, we'd have already bumped into some extraterrestrial neighbors by now. This question was first asked by famous physicist Enrico Fermi during a lunch with his fellow scientists. They were chatting about UFO sightings and aliens, and suddenly Fermi asked, "Where is everyone?" It seemed like a casual comment, but it sparked a huge debate. If the universe is packed with stars, planets, and the possibility of alien life, how come we haven't seen any yet? This discussion gave birth to something we now call the Fermi paradox. It goes like this. Based on what we know, there should be advanced alien civilizations out there, perhaps even many of them. They'd likely have technology that could allow them to travel across space or at least send us signals to let us know they're there. But here's the kicker. Despite all of our technology and all the searching we've done, we haven't found a single shred of solid proof that these advanced civilizations do exist. So where are they? Over the years, a lot of theories trying to explain this paradox have seen the light of day. Let's talk about some of the most interesting ones. The rare Earth hypothesis claims that Earth might just be super rare, and planets like ours, with life, are incredibly uncommon. In this case, we could be the only planet in the Milky Way harboring life, or at least intelligent life. We might also be the first intelligent civilization in our galaxy to reach this level of development. In other words, we could be pioneers, however unbelievable it may sound. At the same time, it's not very scientific to rely on a rare chance. Some people think that maybe advanced civilizations were once here, but left the Milky Way. Perhaps they developed the technology of interstellar travel, enabling them to fly between galaxies. Or they could use other exotic ways, like wormholes, hypothetical structures connecting disparate points in space-time. Maybe they found more interesting and pleasant places to live far away from us. One sad possibility is that when a civilization becomes too advanced, it ends up destroying itself. Whether through war, environmental destruction, or something else, it could be that most civilizations don't last long enough to reach out to others. Now, imagine an advanced civilization being wiped out by a disease before they could even start exploring stars. In other words, it's possible that civilizations just don't survive long enough to meet others. Another hypothesis, not very flattering to us. What if these aliens are using technology that we just don't understand? Maybe they're communicating in ways we can't detect, like using signals beyond our current understanding of physics. Scientists are discussing such possibilities, but haven't found any yet. Aliens might also be intentionally avoiding us. They could be out there but staying silent, not so eager to reveal themselves until we're ready. Speaking of being ready, some people think that aliens could be waiting for us to reach a certain level of development before they make contact. Maybe they don't want to interfere with our growth until we're more advanced. Advanced civilizations could also go into virtual realities. And if they can live in digital worlds, they might stop caring about exploring the physical universe. Why bother? Another wild idea is that some civilizations might go into a type of hibernation, waiting for the universe to cool down, because it might be more energy efficient to do so. And last but not least, there's this creepy possibility that our entire universe is a computer simulation, and aliens are hidden from us on purpose. It's something like a video game that doesn't reveal all its secrets at once until you get to the next level. Now let's talk about the odds of life out there. We know that in just our galaxy, the Milky Way, there are probably around 20 billion planets that are roughly Earth-sized and located in the habitable zone, which means they're just the right distance from their stars to have liquid water. But how many of these planets actually have life? Could it be most of them, just a few, or almost none? And out of the planets that do have life, how many host intelligent beings with technology? In the 1960s, a scientist named Dr. Frank Drake tried to estimate the number of civilizations in our galaxy that could contact us. He came up with a famous equation, later called the Drake equation. It looks complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. It helps us calculate the number of intelligent civilizations based on things like how many stars are born each year, how many have planets, how many planets could support life, and how long a civilization might last. Here's what it looks like. Let's look into this equation in more detail. N is the number of intelligent civilizations that could contact us. R is the rate of star formation in our galaxy. FP is the fraction of stars with planets. NE is the average number of planets per star that could support life. FL is the fraction of those planets where life actually develops. FI is the fraction where intelligent life arises. FC is the fraction of civilizations that can and want to communicate. L is how long these civilizations last before they disappear. The problem is, we don't know the exact values for most of these factors. So when we plug in numbers, which we know with large errors, we get answers with very large errors too. Depending on the values, the number of civilizations in our galaxy could be anywhere from almost 0 to tens of thousands. Right now, the best estimate we can come up with gives us a very small number, close to 0. In other words, even though our galaxy is huge, it's possible we're all alone here. Or nearly alone. One big reason we haven't met any aliens yet is that even if they do exist, we might not be able to visit them, at least not with our current technology. The speed of light is a hard limit in physics, meaning nothing can travel faster than it. This makes interstellar travel super slow. The situation could be better if there were exotic ways of travel, such as wormholes and warp drives. One day, they may turn out to be real, but so far, there is little hope for that. Even if we can't meet aliens face to face, there are still ways we might discover them. One of the biggest projects is called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. SETI scientists use huge telescopes to listen for radio signals from distant planets. If an alien civilization is sending out signals, we might be able to pick them up. And if we have a very powerful telescope, we might use it to take super detailed pictures of distant planets, maybe even Earth-like ones, hundreds of light years away. This could give us a whole new way to search for signs of alien life. In any case, even though we haven't found aliens yet, the search is far from over. Whether it's through new technology, better understanding of physics, or just listening to the stars, we might one day find that we're not alone in the universe. Until then, the question, where is everyone, keeps sparking curiosity. Let me tell you about one of the wildest UFO stories out there. The case of Antonio Villas-Boas, a Brazilian farmer. He claimed he had been abducted by aliens in 1957. He was 23 at the time, working in the fields one night when he saw a strange red light in the sky. That light? According to him, it was an alien spaceship. He said the ship had landed and weird-looking 5-foot-tall aliens grabbed him, took him inside, and covered him in a bizarre, yucky gel. Then, things got even more alarming. Antonio claimed he had been taken to a room where extraterrestrials had taken samples of his blood, and then he had been left alone with a female alien. According to Antonio, she had white hair, red body hair, and cat-like blue eyes. Afterward, she pointed upward. The man thought that she meant she'd have their child in space. The aliens then gave Antonio a quick tour of their ship. But when he tried to take a souvenir, they stopped him. After about 4 hours or so, the man was released and could observe the spaceship fly away. Interestingly, Antonio stuck to his story throughout his whole life. Some people are sure that he made it all up, while others believe the encounter really did happen. One of the strangest things about this story is that right after the events, Boas started complaining of feeling weakness and nausea. He also suffered from headaches and lesions on the skin. Strangely, they appeared without any kind of bruising. After the farmer was examined, he found out that he had been exposed to a large dose of radiation from some unidentified source. His symptoms were those of mild radiation sickness. So whether you believe Antonio's story or not, it is still one of the most famous alien abduction cases out there. But how does science explain all these? Let's break down several explanations. Back in 1980, a researcher named Keith Basterfield suggested that some alien abduction cases might just be hallucinations. He and psychologist Dr. Robert Bartholomew even came up with the idea that people who reported abductions might be fantasy-prone, meaning they could have a hard time telling the difference between their imagination and reality. In 2011, scientists at the Phase Research Center took things a step further by using lucid dreaming to simulate alien encounters. They found that volunteers who were aware they were dreaming could actually create abduction-like experiences. In fact, 75% of the volunteers had dreams that felt just like encounters with aliens. Another explanation involves the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Many people, about 40%, experience sleep paralysis at least once in their lives. When this happens, they can have vivid dreams, and sometimes those dreams involve aliens. The combination of a super realistic dream and being unable to move can easily convince someone that they were abducted. Some experts think alien abductions might be linked to mental trauma. For example, D. Scott Rogo, editor of the magazine Fate, suggested that people who claim to have been abducted could be dealing with personal crises or recovering from past trauma. Such cases might also be false memories from hypnosis. Regressive hypnosis is a controversial technique used to uncover lost memories of alien abductions. While some believe it can help people recall genuine experiences, critics argue that it often leads to false memories. Hypnotists might accidentally suggest ideas during the session, leading people to believe something happened that never actually did. Studies have shown that around 50% of memories recovered through this method are likely made up. So, whether it's dreams, hallucinations, or false memories, there are plenty of theories explaining why some people genuinely believe they've been abducted by aliens.
One of the best and most convincing pieces of evidence that extraterrestrial civilizations have visited Earth could be the epic Nuremberg space battle of April the 4th, 1561. It was recorded either in 1561 or 1566. Different sources provide different information. All the retellings of this story focus on the woodcut picture and a vague summary of events that occurred that day. The emphasis is always on crashed spaceships and space battles. Almost everywhere you read or hear the story, it goes like this. The inhabitants of the city woke up early on an April morning and saw a staggering celestial show that looked like a real space battle. This story sounds even more convincing when you find out that some objects allegedly fought for quite a while. And some even crashed. You can see them in the lower right corner. Look at the picture once again. Orbs and crosses fighting, a giant arrow and bizarre tubes, crashing ships. Wow, that had to be a spectacular cosmic battle. To make it all more plausible, Hans Glaser, the artist behind the woodcut, was a very real person. He really did woodcuts, and this one is indeed from the time and place that it says it is, meaning it's not fake, and it does depict a real event that had its own witnesses. For all intents and purposes, it looks like very convincing proof of aliens visiting us, but don't get your hopes up. A superficial perusal of facts seems to confirm an extraterrestrial presence on our planet. But the most likely explanation is much more mundane. The Nuremberg 1561 UFO battle is just an atmospheric phenomenon called a sundog, or parhelion. A sundog is a concentrated spot of sunlight that can sometimes be seen to the right or to the left of the sun, or even on its both sides simultaneously. Sundogs often appear as a pair of patches of light with subtle colors at the same altitude over the horizon as the sun. They can have a variety of forms, from colorful spots to patches of light so intense and bright, it looks like there are two additional suns in the sky. Sundogs are weird looking enough to make it seem that something scary and otherworldly is going on in the sky. At the same time, it's just our planet's atmosphere or ice in the upper parts of the sky acting as a prism or reflective device. This prism makes the light from the sun or moon do weird things. This image can help you visualize the phenomenon. Apparently, Nuremberg had the perfect conditions for this phenomenon to occur. If you examine the depiction of this event and compare it with modern pictures and videos, you'll soon realize that a sundog is indeed a more likely explanation than the galactic empire paying us a visit. Let's find the proof of this statement in the translated description of these events and in the woodcut picture itself. First, the sun showed and was seen with two blood-colored half-round strokes, like the diminishing moon right through the sun, and in the sun, above, under, and on both sides, stood blood-colored and partly bluish, or iron-colored, also black-colored round orbs. Now here's the photo of a sundog. It has a halo surrounding it, and a red orb. And if we have at least one red orb, there could be others showing up during other events. Plus, keep in mind that sundogs are like prisms. So, depending on how light is reflected, there could be multiple colors present during such a phenomenon. Now, referring to circled plates mentioned in the description, those could be halos. For example, this sun halo looks vaguely plate-like, and it seems to be linked to other sun halos. And indeed, people have seen halos with multiple orbs. Some of the orbs could have taken a cross-like shape. If we watch some modern videos of sundogs, we might notice that the orbs on film are sun-colored. But since the Nuremberg event happened between 4 and 5 a.m., the clouds and the sun could have had reddish and orange hues. As for the fighting, it could be as simple as one shape moving a bit and changing shape along with the movements of the sun. It could have looked as if it was pushing the other shapes out of the way. Do you agree with the scientific explanation? Or do you prefer to think that Earth was visited by guests from a galaxy far, far away? Write your opinion in the comments.
A Dyson sphere is a theoretical megaproject, a ginormous sphere encircling a star with platforms orbiting in tight formation. It's supposed to be an ultimate solution both for energy production and living space. The creators of a Dyson sphere get a lot of surface area for habitation and the ability to catch every tiny bit of solar radiation and heat produced by their central star. The first person to theorize about such a bizarre construction was British-American theoretical physicist Freeman Dyson. According to him, an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization could consider building this sphere after colonizing some moons and planets in their local stellar neighborhood. With the growth of their population, these aliens would need more and more energy to sustain their lives. Dyson calculated that assuming that this alien society grew at 1% per year, their area and energy needs would become 1 trillion times larger in a mere 3,000 years. And if their solar system contained a space body similar in size to Jupiter, they could take it apart and spread its mass in a spherical shell by building a structure at twice the distance between our planet and the Sun. This amount of material would be sufficient to build a huge number of orbiting platforms. Each of them could be 6 to 10 feet thick, which would basically allow this civilization to live on their star-facing surfaces. A shell this thick could be comfortably habitable and capable of holding all the equipment needed for using solar radiation without falling onto the star from the inside. But after absorbing all this solar energy, the sphere would have to re-radiate it. Otherwise, the energy would build up, eventually causing the construction to melt. It means that the light of a star wrapped in a Dyson sphere would look dimmed or even completely darkened, depending on how dense the platforms orbiting it were. At the same time, it would glow unusually bright in infrared wavelengths invisible to the unaided eye. Because of this infrared radiation, Dyson spheres are classified as a type of technosignature. It's a sign of activity that astronomers can use to discover intelligent life forms in the universe. Some Earth-based researchers have infrared maps of the night sky they examine in hopes of spotting Dyson spheres. So far, no one has ever found one. However, one study has selected several Dyson sphere candidates. Its authors have processed large amounts of information using a special data pipeline for combining and analyzing information. One of the main search criteria is the detection of excessive infrared radiation. At the same time, it's important to distinguish this radiation from that emitted by natural objects. After a complicated filtering of millions of objects, the researchers identified 7 potential Dyson spheres. Sure, further analysis is needed to determine their nature. To do this, scientists want to use optical spectroscopy, which may reveal more details about these objects and their origins. At the same time, the researchers admit that these candidate Dyson spheres might have other explanations. For example, they could be debris disks or protoplanetary disks of young stars. Only more research can show whether we can find traces of other civilizations among star systems. For now, it's still an open question. Interestingly, Dyson spheres have been spoken about a lot in science fiction. As far back as 1937, a novel called Star Maker by Olaf Stapledon described systems in one particular galaxy that were surrounded by a gauze of light traps, which focused solar energy for intelligent use. That was the reason why the entire galaxy was dimmed. In another novel, Ring World, the writer spoke about a ring-shaped artificial structure surrounding a star. Long before satellite TV or GPS, NASA made a huge silver balloon to show that global communication via satellite was possible. This was ECHO, the U.S. first communications satellite. We can say that it paved the way for many current communication technologies. It all started when scientists realized that we already had a satellite that could reflect signals. Right, I'm talking about the moon. After a series of tests, they successfully used Earth's natural satellite as a huge reflector to send voice signals from California to New Jersey. They even established a two-way telephone line using the moon as a reflector. But how was it possible? Often in underground car parks or even outside, mirrors are installed at turns with poor visibility. It's an easy way to look around corners. Fundamentally, the same idea has been used for almost the entire history of wireless signal transmission over long distances. Imagine you want to send a signal from one point on the planet to another point on the other side of the globe. The direct signal cannot travel this way. Therefore, you need some mirror, but high in the sky. At first, people used the upper layers of the atmosphere for reflection, but this is tricky and requires a lot of effort. Therefore, scientists decided, why not launch an artificial mirror into orbit? Because just like light bounces off a mirror, radio waves can be reflected too. When some signal bounces off a surface, it spreads out in all directions. A small portion of this signal is bound to make its way back to Earth, and there, it can be picked up by a receiver in a different place. The larger the reflector is, the stronger and more focused signal it will return. But let's get back to Echo. Originally, it wasn't designed to be a communication satellite. Engineers first thought of the balloon as an air density experiment. They believed that the ways to measure air density in the upper atmosphere were insufficient at that time. So they designed a better craft. But later, due to some circumstances, Project Echo turned into a communication relay. Technologically, Echo was rather simple, and it functioned as an enormous mirror in orbit. But to work, it had to be supermassive. Echo 1 was made from a huge sheet of mylar plastic. It was incredibly thin, a mere 1/10 the thickness of a human hair. The sheet itself was cut into more than 100 gores, and each of them was covered with a thin layer of aluminum. That's what gave the balloon its shiny appearance. After that, the gores were glued together, creating the final sphere. Once it was finished, NASA inflated Echo for the first time. The huge balloon came to life in 1958. It was one of the largest things ever launched into space, and the only way to send it into space was to pack it down and inflate it once it was in orbit, and it turned out much more challenging than one could think. Instead of carrying its own air, Echo had small canisters with benzoic acid. That's a special powder that turns directly from a solid to a gas when heated. So when the balloon was released into space, the heat from the sun turned the powder into gas in no time. It all expanded inside the balloon, and in a matter of seconds, it was fully inflated. Such a massive object floating in space made it a target for micrometeorites. To protect the balloon from small punctures, engineers supplied it with an extra amount of benzoic acid. It could be released to maintain the balloon's pressure. Echo 2, though, had an even better solution. Its skin was made of mylar too, but it was sandwiched between two huge sheets of aluminum foil. When the balloon was pressurized, the foil stretched, stiffening and hardening in place. It made the balloon become rigid without any additional internal pressure to maintain its shape. Even if micrometeorites hit it, it could still hold its shape. No wonder these giant, shiny things were very visible. For a decade, they were some of the brightest objects in the sky, brighter than the North Star. And this brightness was the key feature of the balloon's design. To send and receive signals, the ground stations had to be able to track the balloons as they moved across the sky. The easiest way was to point the antenna dish directly at the balloons once they were visible. But it was only possible during twilight hours when the sun was illuminating them. When the balloons couldn't be spotted with the unaided eye, they relied on NASA's tracking network, predicting the orbits of the satellites. On Echo 2, there was a tracking beacon. It sent out pulses, which made the balloon easier to track during the day. Most of the project's communication was done between special ground stations in New Jersey and California. At the same time, Echo was supposed to be a global experiment. Thanks to their orbits, the balloons flew over every part of the planet. It allowed transmissions to be done literally anywhere by anyone who had the necessary equipment. One of the cool things about the balloons was that they weren't only used for sending signals around the world, they also helped researchers to accurately measure the shape and size of our planet. You see, at that time, the most accurate measurements relied on a method called star triangulation, and the actual distances between cities and continents could be off by more than 100 miles. So researchers used ECHO to figure out the exact location of different points all around the globe. They measured the time a signal needed to travel from two locations, which gave them the precise distance to ECHO. After that, by measuring the angle at which ECHO appeared in the sky, scientists formed a triangle, being able to calculate the distance between 2 points to within several feet. It made all the calculations 10 times more precise. At that time, though, NASA was still a very young organization, so people working there knew very little about the long-term effects satellites experienced in space. And one of the biggest unknown factors was atmospheric drag. Even at really high altitudes, like 1,000 miles and more, there are tiny traces of atmosphere that can slow down objects. Imagine trying to walk through waist-deep water. The water will resist your movements and make it harder to move forward. The same happens with spacecraft. They push on the air, and the air pushes back in the opposite direction. The denser the atmosphere a spacecraft is traveling through, the greater amount of drag it experiences. It allows researchers to estimate atmospheric density by measuring how drag changes the orbit of a satellite. ECHOs had a large surface area to mass ratio, so the balloons felt the effects of drag more than any other satellite. Observing ECHO 1, NASA managed to track how its orbit changed over a few years, and it was a lot. Strangely, it wasn't atmospheric drag that had altered it. Solar wind radiating from the sun was to blame. It was pushing ECHO 1 toward Earth. The balloons kept working perfectly well throughout the 60s. They proved that a global communication system in space was possible. Plus, they gave rise to many new techniques and technologies. For example, the first balloons spawned other satelloons, a combination of satellites and balloons. ECHO 2 also fulfilled the original purpose of measuring air density and solar radiation. ECHOS's metallized plastic helped scientists evaluate the use and long-term durability of similar materials for other spacecraft. By the mid-60s, active communication satellites had become a more effective solution than passive systems like ECHO. With the help of a passive system, the transmitted signal had to be strong enough to travel all the way into orbit and back. And with an active system, the signal only needs to be strong enough to travel all the way up there to the satellite, which then gives it power for the return trip. In any case, during their mission, the iconic balloons showed us even more than we could have imagined. Afterward, the receiver that was used to detect ECHO's signals continued its work, as well as other materials used for the ECHO project. They are still used in different spacecraft.
Any UFO enthusiast would tell you that the world is teeming with strange occurrences, sightings, government disclosures, and the sudden appearance of unknown craft. In 2021, the CIA declassified thousands of pages of UFO-related documents. And yet, modern-day mysteries are only the latest in a long history of unexplainable phenomena. And one of the most bizarre and chilling tales comes from Japan. It's the legend of the Utsurobune, a mysterious otherworldly vessel. This tale suggests that we might not be the first to toy with the idea of visitors from space. The Utsurobune arrived as early as 1803. It was described as a ship not of wood or sailcloth, but something alien. Professor Tanaka Kazuo of Gifu University, who has dedicated decades to the study of the Utsurobune legend, has pointed out that the mysterious ship of this tale resembles a flying saucer. And it was long before the modern concept of UFOs saw the light of day. So on February 22nd, 1803, off the coast of Hitachi Province, Japan, the sea seemed to give birth to an enigma. Fishermen spotted a strange vessel. It was unlike anything they had seen before, so they felt pretty unnerved when they dragged it to shore. The craft was over 10 feet tall and nearly 18 feet wide, and it had an uncanny resemblance to a koro.
a traditional Japanese incense burner. But it was made not of clay or wood, but strange, lacquered rosewood on its upper half and metal plates on the bottom. As the fishermen peered inside through glass windows, they saw that an unknown script adorned the walls. They could neither read nor understand those symbols. Inside, there were cakes, water, and bedsheets. It was creepy cargo for a vessel that defied logic. And then there was another mystery, a woman. She seemed to be around 20 years old, with skin as pale as porcelain. Her red hair was long and had strands of white. She was dressed in long, smooth garments of unknown material and spoke in a language no one recognized. But the strangest thing was the box she carried. It was a rectangular object that she clutched tightly. She didn't allow anyone to touch it, no matter how persistently they asked. Rumors spread like wildfire. Most people remained cautious. They feared that tampering with such a mystery might invoke dark forces beyond human understanding. So, they chose to let the sea take its prey. According to some sources, the woman was returned to her vessel and sent back into the ocean. Those who had found her were chilled by the encounter. They were afraid that something terrible had been set in motion. In the darkness of the night, one could almost hear whispers that the Utsurobune was not the first of its kind to drift ashore, nor would it be the last. Indeed, that Utsurobun was not a single, isolated incident. Other accounts exist too, scattered across time and place. In 1698, a woman in a hollow ship was said to have appeared in Toyohashi. She was sent away when no one could understand her language. And in the decades that followed, sightings of Utsurobune and other strange vessels continued, each one described as eerily similar, with passengers who spoke no known language and carried strange objects. The legend continues to evolve. In 1977, 2 rare ink prints were discovered. They revealed new details and locations tied to the Utsurobune. It seems that this story, this riddle, has never quite been solved. Were those visitors from other worlds, or probably from other planets? Could those legends, with their uncanny similarities, be tied to the same truth? Were the Utsurobune vessels real, or were they the product of imagination? We don't have a certain answer yet. It was a warm morning in Siberia, June 30th, 1908. Suddenly, a bright flash illuminated the sky. It was an event no one could explain for decades. The Tunguska explosion, one of the most mysterious disasters to have ever occurred on Earth. It could have been an asteroid crash, like the one that destroyed dinosaurs millions of years ago. But for one creepy fact, there was no impact crater. The event itself happened in the vast forests of northern Siberia, over the Podkamennaya Tunguska River. The blast was so insanely powerful that it leveled about 80 million trees across a massive area of 830 square miles. What phenomenon could have had such an immense force? No one could understand it. Thousands of animals lost their lives and the ground lay scorched. Witnesses saw glowing skies and something they described as a fireball, a bluish light brighter than the sun that had streaked across the sky. Seconds later, there was a flash and a sound like artillery fire. The shockwave shattered windows hundreds of miles away. People felt the blast's force, getting knocked off their feet from afar. For years, scientists puzzled over what exactly had happened. As I've already mentioned, weirdly, the area had no impact crater. But the damage and eyewitness reports left no doubt that something immense and horrifying had occurred. This bizarre lack of evidence resulted in wild theories. Some people suggested it was an alien spacecraft that had crashed in the region. Others speculated it might have been a mini black hole or antimatter particle. There was also an idea that about 10 million tons of natural gas had leaked from deep in Earth's crust. This gas rose into the atmosphere and drifted along like a giant invisible wick. Eventually, there was a spark, maybe lightning, which set it on fire. The flames traveled down the wick of gas back to its source on the ground, causing a huge explosion. But this idea didn't get very popular. Which theory was true? Scientists couldn't agree on one and were in doubt. To add to the mystery, the impact area was incredibly difficult to reach. It took almost 2 decades before scientists could investigate that remote site. In 1927, scientist Leonid Kulik brought an expedition there. They did their best to investigate the region and find the long-awaited answers. But they found nothing. No meteorite fragments, no crater, just millions of fallen trees and slowly disappearing signs of total devastation. The mystery began to clear when a similar event occurred over a century later.
On February 15, 2013, the Chelyabinsk meteor exploded in an airburst over Chelyabinsk, around 1,500 miles west of Tunguska. This time, many people witnessed and recorded the event on video, which gave scientists vital clues. New computer models helped scientists reconstruct the size, speed, and impact of the Chelyabinsk meteor. It was likely a large asteroid about the size of a 5-story building, exploding around 15 miles above ground. The blast shattered 1 million windows and hurt over 1,000 people. Fortunately, it wasn't powerful enough to cause damage on the same scale as Tunguska. Now imagine a meteoroid racing into Earth's atmosphere, transforming into a blazing meteor. It's traveling so fast that the air in front of it compresses and heats up, setting it on fire. But it's so large that it doesn't just burn up. All of a sudden, it explodes. When that happens, the blast releases so much energy that a powerful shockwave spreads out. Since this explosion happens in the air, it leaves no impact crater. Back in the early 1900s, with limited technology and the remote location, scientists were left with a puzzle. Only much later did they eventually conclude it had been an airburst, where an object explodes high in the atmosphere, never striking the ground but releasing enough energy to devastate the area. Most likely, it was a giant asteroid about the size of a 25-story building. It could have been moving at around 33,500 miles per hour and exploding about 3 to 6 miles above Earth's surface with enormous, incomparable force.
So, dark matter is a mysterious substance that makes up about 85% of the total matter in the universe, yet we can't see it or touch it. The regular matter that we're used to forms stars, planets, and everything around us. But dark matter doesn't emit, absorb, or reflect light, which is why we can't even see it. We don't even know if it actually exists. The reason why we believe in dark matter is because it leaves gravitational effects on galaxies and other cosmic objects. For example, spiral galaxies spin in a way that doesn't match the law of physics we know. According to our current knowledge, the outer edges of these galaxies should slow down, but they don't. They either keep the same speed or even speed up. It also seems to be acting like an invisible glue that holds galaxies together. If dark matter didn't add some invisible gravitational mass, the galaxies would literally break apart, not being able to hold stars together. But even though it's fundamentally important for our world, we still don't know exactly what dark matter is made of. This has been going on for years. Some experiments saw hints of it, but no one's been able to prove it beyond a doubt. Maybe the future circular collider will be able to find it. There's a mysterious force in space that seems to be pulling our entire galaxy, along with many others, toward it. This force is known as the Great Attractor, wink wink. It's a crazy massive region in space, about 10 million billion times the mass of our Sun, with a super powerful gravitational pull. Scientists think it might be a super cluster of galaxies, but they're not sure. The problem is, we can't see it directly because it's hidden behind the Milky Way, while the Milky Way itself, horrifyingly, is moving toward it at a speed of about 370 miles per hour. Now, just like with dark matter, we only know it's there because of how it affects the movement of galaxies around it. These galaxies are being pulled toward this region, even though, since the universe is expanding, they should be moving away from each other. What's even weirder is that this great attractor might itself be moving towards something even bigger, the Shapley supercluster. It's the largest concentration of galaxies in our nearby universe. In 2017, astronomers discovered a strange object called Oumuamua. This was the first known visitor from another star system. The thing was quite small, from about 330 feet to about 0.6 miles long. It was also long and thin, had a reddish color, and moved in a very unusual way. As it passed by the Sun, it unexpectedly sped up and then left our solar system just like that. Tons of theories started sparking up. It was too weird looking for an asteroid. Scientists thought it might be a comet, but it didn't have the usual traits of one, like a tail of gas and dust. Eventually, some scientists even started to suggest the wildest theories, like it might be an extraterrestrial probe. People have been making a huge fuss about Oumuamua ever since. But after a while, it turned out it was just a natural object with unique properties. It was probably a fragment from a distant star system, like a piece of a disintegrated comet or even a chunk of a planet. But Oumuamua caught everyone's attention so much that in 2022, astronomers even proposed to send a spacecraft to catch up with it. This mission could take about 26 years. Hey, stay tuned. Now, as for extraterrestrial creatures, where is everyone? There's this thing called the rare Earth hypothesis that suggests that life as we know it is actually super rare in space. In the 70s and 80s, scientists argued that Earth is just an ordinary planet in an ordinary solar system. If we look at it this way, life should be widespread across the universe. It seems unreasonable to think that with trillions of planets out there will be no planet like ours anywhere. But then, a geologist, Peter Ward, argued that the development of complex life like ours depends on a very rare combination of things. The history of the planet, with all of its astrophysical and geological conditions, should line up perfectly for complex life to develop. So, just think about it. Being in the right zone of the galaxy, on a good distance around a stable star, a rocky planet with water and the right temperature, emergence of molecules, monkeys deciding to walk, and so on. This would explain the Fermi paradox, which asks, if extraterrestrial life is common, why haven't we seen any signs of it? Well, the rare Earth hypothesis explains it. The universe might be full of plants, extraterrestrial critters, and fun animals. But would there be an intelligent species like humans? That's another story. As for humans being intelligent, that's another matter. Dark matter? And even if they do exist, we could be incredibly far away from each other. That would make communication or contact with other intelligent species very unlikely. Now, there's another similar theory called the Great Filter. This idea says that there might be a big obstacle somewhere along the path from microbes to advanced civilizations. It was the idea of the economist Robin Hanson. He also believed that maybe intelligent life, as we know it, isn't that common in the universe, although he assumed it's not because our planet was the result of tons of unique conditions, but because there must be some sort of filter that reduces the chance of life progressing to our point. Who knows where this filter is? It might be in the stage of early microbes, which means that we managed to get through it or somehow ahead in the future, which means we might go extinct like many other species before us. Well, maybe in the next stages, such as colonizing other planets and the galaxy, are much harder, if not impossible. Something unexpected might come up, potential catastrophes, resource exhaustion, or other challenges. Now, there's this thing called a pulsar. It's a weird type of star that sends out regular bursts of radio waves, like a flickering space lighthouse. You see, in space you often find a pulsar and a smaller companion star that rotates around it. But one day, scientists discovered this system, which was also surrounded by tons of some energetic material. They suddenly realized that these are probably the remains of another companion star, which was very big in size. But the pulsar was blasting out powerful radiation and particles, slowly consuming its companion. This is kind of like how a black widow spider eats its mate, hence the name. Since then, they've found other similar systems. They've grouped them all into one spider family. There are also redback pulsars, which destroy slightly larger companions, and huntsman pulsars, which have companions that are massive enough to resist being completely destroyed. Even though so many safety measures are taken, space is still an unpredictable place where we don't have as much power as we'd like to. Back in 1973, during a spacewalk on the Skylab space station, 2 astronauts were in a very risky situation. They were out in space fixing things, but they didn't have the same handy jetpacks like astronauts do today. They could only rely on safety tethers. Suddenly, the solar arrays they were working on moved unexpectedly and pushed them out of their position, almost sending them drifting off into space. Thankfully, the safety ropes did their job. Strong, resistant to heat, and attached to astronauts' waists, these tethers can hold a weight of about 881 pounds. This accident happened before SAFER came into use. It's easy to understand why accidents at work are way scarier up there than some regular 9-to-5 job on Earth. But that's why you have more training and special equipment to keep you safe. First, astronauts are always attached to the spacecraft with tethers, so they don't float away like a helium balloon. It may seem like a spacewalk is such a big deal that the ISS needs to stop when the astronauts are out there doing their thing, but it's not like that. If the ISS were ever to stop, it would fall straight down to our planet. So, once an astronaut is in a stable orbit, they stay in that orbit, unless some new force acts out. The first spacewalk wasn't as simple as those done later. It was performed in 1965, and it lasted 12 minutes. 2 men set out on a mission. One of them was supposed to float in space for a while taking pictures. But things went wrong. His spacesuit expanded too much, making it hard to move. He started to feel overheated, so he had to let some oxygen out of his suit, which was very risky. He could run out of air or get sick like a deep-sea diver. Getting back into the spacecraft was tough as well, but he somehow managed to do it. Then, more problems came. The spacecraft started spinning, oxygen levels rose dangerously, and there was a risk of an explosion. After a lot of struggle, they made it back to Earth, but landed in a random forest surrounded by wolves and bears during a snowstorm. It took a rescue party to find them. Not a very encouraging story to listen to while you're waiting to go out. But cheer up, things have improved since then. Hundreds of astronauts have taken spacewalks without any serious problems. So here you are, whizzing right along with the giant ISS. Your first spacewalk goes almost flawlessly, so you can enjoy the view a bit. It's hard to control the way you move, but tethers still do their job, so you can focus on your task. Until you realize they failed. How did they untie? You notice you're floating off in some random direction. There's nothing you can hold on to. Your body is weightless, and it has started to spin around. It's so frustrating when you can't take control of your movements. An astronaut named Scott Kelly described this unpleasant feeling in his book Endurance. He was turning around and upside down in the darkness and could see nothing but what was right there in front of his face. It was like a scuba diver floating in murky waters, totally disoriented, with no way of telling which direction was wrong and which one could be right. In space, you can't kick or flail to change your course. It might be fun floating inside a spacecraft with zero gravity, playing and fooling around, but seeing just the endless void filled with stars in the distance and knowing what could happen makes it frightening. And now you're getting closer to Earth's atmosphere. It might seem like the safest option because it makes you feel like you're going home, but in reality, you better hope you'll change direction. If your angle and speed are wrong, you might re-enter the planet's atmosphere and burn up. Not a good deal. NASA trains astronauts for such situations, so you know what's your next step. Activating an emergency jetpack called SAFER. This tool is designed to help you stabilize and move in space. You don't even need the tethers. You can control the movements of your jetpack with a small joystick. Finally, all those hours of playing video games will pay off. These jetpacks became an inevitable part of the spacewalk package almost 30 years ago. So far, no astronaut has had to use one during a spacewalk. Whew! You're back on track, and you're moving away from Earth's atmosphere. You're getting closer to the ISS, flying manually. Oops! These jetpacks have one big flaw. They have a limited amount of fuel, and your SAFER has just run out of it. Okay, take a deep breath. One of the most important things every astronaut has to learn is to be prepared for literally anything. This strange radio signal wasn't found by a scientist on a serious mission. It was actually discovered by a college student just doing a regular project for school. Tyrone O'Doherty, an undergrad student at Curtin University in Australia, was sifting through old data of the southern sky. He was looking for any weird blinking radio signals. He finally stumbled upon one from 2018 that seemed to shoot radio waves towards Earth like a lighthouse beam. Excited about his find, Tyrone shared it with his mentor, radio astronomer Natasha Hurley Walker. She dove into researching this signal, hoping for a breakthrough. But despite checking different frequency data, they hit a dead end. But then, Natasha spotted a pattern. The signal repeated every 18 minutes. This was huge. But just as they were gearing up to study it further, poof! The signal vanished after only 3 months, leaving them with nothing. Not giving up, Natasha and her team scanned the skies again, desperate for a clue. Months passed, but nothing turned up. They were ready to give up, and then suddenly, a new signal popped up. This one kept blinking for 5 minutes, then it disappeared. And then it came back exactly 22 minutes later. The main question was if that signal was related to an 18-minute one. To figure it out, Natasha went back to the old radio data from that area. As they dug deeper, they realized that yes, and these signals aren't anything new. They'd been beaming towards Earth for 35 years. Back in 1988, Indian and American telescopes had caught them, but they got buried under tons of other data. This was great news for space explorers because it meant they could now calculate how far away this mysterious object was. After doing the math, they figured out it was incredibly far, even on a space scale, 15,000 light-years from Earth. Now, the only thing left to uncover was what exactly this object was. Walker and his team started comparing it to all the known radio-emitting objects out there. Yet its source remains a mystery. The signals still pop up every 22 minutes on NASA screens, always ending with a frustrating match not found message. The scientists called it J183910. Some think that the signal might come from some extraterrestrial beings. Maybe it's the signal that SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, has been waiting for. This project has been working for over 50 years, trying to find any evidence of life beyond Earth. They also scan the skies for radio waves, laser pulses, and other mysterious signals. So maybe it's a way for extraterrestrial folk to communicate their location. Over billions of years, the surface of the moon has been hit by asteroids and comets, causing bits and pieces to constantly break off from the impacts. Because of this, all the surface material is pretty loosely packed. So when there are quakes, slopes in the same area can become susceptible to landslides or new faults opening up. Future settlements located too close to these unstable slopes could put everyone living inside these lunar bases at risk. Moon dust adds another layer of complexity because without erosion or water to smooth it out, it can harden to the point of being as tough as glass. If we really want to understand how dangerous moonquakes might be for people living and working on the moon in the future, space agencies still need to map out and get new seismic data, and not just from the South Pole, but from the entire satellite. In 2025, the Farside Seismic Sweep Mission, or FSS, plans to deploy two of the most high-precision seismometers ever built to the Schrödinger crater, which is located on the dark side of the moon. Finding out what's happening on the ground there is crucial for understanding the complex lunar structure and its internal dynamics. Scientists are still trying to figure out whether the lack of recorded seismic activity on the far side of the moon is due to current instruments not being capable of detecting it, or if it's due to some kind of interference from melted material in the mantle. Once they have this answer, it will be easier to fully understand the phenomenon of shallow moonquakes and assess their implications for future neighborhoods on our natural satellite. Now, you may have heard that Earth is also shrinking, but it's a different process. Basically, the moon is getting smaller mainly because its core is cooling down naturally. The Earth's core is cooling too, but our planet got its crust with tectonic plates, unlike the moon, which only has one plate. So the energy from Earth's core shifts those plates around or comes through volcanic eruptions. Earth is actually losing mass overall due to atmospheric loss. Our planet loses about 100 million pounds of mass per year, mostly from a leaky atmosphere. Earth's gravity isn't strong enough to retain the lightest particles, like hydrogen and helium, which escape into space. But don't worry, these numbers aren't cause for alarm, considering that our planet's atmosphere weighs about 5 quadrillion tons, a number I can't even imagine. So, in other words, it would take many, many, many times the current age of the universe for it to completely evaporate. We found a water cloud in space around a black hole. It's a gigantic water reservoir that's located about 12 billion light-years away from Earth. This must be the largest and farthest water reservoir ever detected in the universe. This one cloud contains an astonishing 140 trillion times more water than all of Earth's oceans combined. That's wet. The water surrounds a quasar, which is basically an incredibly energetic supermassive black hole. This quasar is about 20 billion times larger than the Sun and emits as much energy as 1,000 trillion suns. You do the math. As the black hole slowly consumes everything around it, it releases energy. This energy heats the surrounding gases and dust, causing the formation of water vapor. As a result, the black hole is surrounded by a huge water cloud and all the other gases and dust bath around it. This pair formed when the universe was only 1.6 billion years old, just a fraction of its current age. That means that the water isn't young at all and has been existing in galaxies for billions of years now. This quasar will only keep getting scarier and bigger. If it eats up all this gas and dust around, it could grow up to 6 times its current size, potentially becoming 120 billion times larger than the Sun. Think about that. There once was a kingdom where the ancient Egyptians traveled to buy gifts for pharaohs, sort of like an ancient shopping mall. This kingdom, named the Land of Punt, was rich in luxury goods, including gold, aromatic resins, blackwood, ebony, ivory, and exotic animals like leopards and baboons. All of these sound like great gift ideas to me. The Land of Punt was an especially important trading partner for Egypt for over 1,000 years. But if you plan to go there, the bad news is that it hasn't survived to these days, and nobody knows for sure exactly where Punt was located. We only know about it from records. The most famous of them were left on the walls of the temple of Queen Hatshepsut, who had sent an expedition to Punt. Scientists have been trying to find the exact location of this rich land for over 150 years. It could have been southeast of Egypt, in a coastal region south of it along the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, and the Indian Ocean, or it could have covered the Horn of Africa and the area across the sea in southern Arabia. Now researchers were finally able to narrow down the possible locations thanks to a study of baboon mummies. Ancient Egyptians admired baboons and even thought they were related to the deity of the moon and wisdom. One species, the sacred baboon, was often shown in wall paintings, sitting with its tail curled to the right, and was mummified in this position. Another type, the olive baboon, was wrapped up in one giant cocoon. Both types were found in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. But if you remember geography lessons, baboons just don't wander around Egypt. So they must have been brought there through trade with other regions. Primatologists, Egyptologists, geographers, and geochemists look at the mummified baboons from 2 different time periods in ancient Egypt. Some were from the New Kingdom period, and others were from the Ptolemaic period. The scientists did some more hard work and analyzed tissues from 155 baboons from 75 separate places in eastern Africa and southern Arabia. Those were all areas that they thought could be the ancient Land of Punt. They measured oxygen and strontium in the baboons' bodies. When animals drink water and eat plants, their teeth, hair, and bones show a geographic signature of where they've lived, thanks to these elements they contain. Scientists use a special method called isotopic mapping and found out that the New Kingdom baboons they analyzed came from a location in Eritrea, Ethiopia, or Somalia. 5 mummified baboons from the Ptolemaic period had strontium levels that matched those found in Egypt. So, ancient Egyptians might have had a special place to breed and keep baboons, probably in Memphis, a city in Lower Egypt, not Tennessee. Meanwhile, paleontologists from New Zealand got lucky, as some boulders had split open from the tide and revealed fossils of the largest penguin that has ever lived on Earth. The scientists used laser scanners to make 3D models of the ancient penguin bones. They compared these bones to the flipper size of modern penguins and did some math as to how much the old penguins might have weighed. Today, the biggest penguins, emperor penguins, weigh between 55 to 100 pounds. Researchers think that the penguins from the past that they found weighed around 340 pounds, real giants in the penguin world. These huge flightless birds lived in the oceans around New Zealand more than 50 million years ago, after the dinosaurs went extinct. They totally took advantage of their big bodies to stay warm in the cold water. They might have even traveled the world thanks to it. And they'd scare off any predators, but they didn't have any. The asteroid that took down the dinosaurs also got rid of most big marine reptiles, and the ancestors of seals and whales were still living on land. Back in 1992, 4 farmers in China were draining water from their ponds and accidentally bumped into a ship full of gold and ancient statues worth millions. Just kidding, they actually found the Longgu Caves. Those are 24 big caves created by people a long, long time ago. Even though they are so large and well-made, no one knows who built them, why they were built, or how they were built. Experts think the caves are at least 2,000 years old, but they don't understand why these caves aren't mentioned in any historical records. All of the Longyu caverns look the same and aren't connected to each other. Each cave has one entrance connected to a vertical shaft with a carved staircase. Rain and water from the surface can flow into the caves through these stairs. To manage this water, the caves have special grooves, channels, and a system to catch the water at the bottom. So it looks like the ancient builders were real pros when it came to drainage and water management. Maybe my town could learn a lesson from them, as it turns into Venice after every heavy shower. Anyway, the caverns were built below a hill, named after a bird that is one of the most respected creatures in Chinese mythology and culture. It symbolizes all the best things, like high virtue, grace, and the union of yin and yang. Scientists think there could be a connection between the caverns and the bird, but it's just a theory so far. Experts from the National Institute of Ocean Technology in India were doing their routine pollution surveys when they found some structures that looked like a city underwater. Using special sonar technology, the team found big geometric shapes on the ocean floor. They brought up different items from the site, like pottery, beads, sculptures, parts of walls, and even human bones and teeth. They thought the ruins belonged to a civilization older than the Bronze Age Indus Valley Civilization, which is the earliest urban culture of the Indian subcontinent that we know of so far. But not everyone joined in on celebrating this awesome discovery. Some archaeologists refused to believe it and thought it could be some computer tricks. And even when they saw hundreds of artifacts from the ocean floor, they said an ancient river could have brought them there from someplace else. The team that discovered the underwater site decided to prove they were right. They chose a piece of wood as their main evidence. They tested it and found it was 9,500 years old. That could be the age of the entire site. Skeptics still insist that we can't rewrite all human history because of one piece of wood. Even 23 years since the discovery, no one is sure about the final answer. This is partly because it's hard to explore the site. It's in extremely dangerous waters with strong currents and riptides. During the cool Antarctica summer, from late November through January, geologists from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee climbed the frozen slopes of the McIntyre Promontory in the Transantarctic Mountains. High above the ice fields, they looked through the mountain's gray rocks for fossils from when the continent had green forests. By the end of their trip, the geologists found fossil pieces from 13 trees. These fossils show that the trees are over 260 million years old. This means the forest grew at the end of the Permian period before the first dinosaurs even appeared. More than 90% of all species on Earth disappeared back then, including the polar forests. These trees would have been very tough if they grew in Antarctica and could have survived. But a huge increase in gases like carbon dioxide and methane must have taken them down. This Antarctic forest is a terrific way for us to see what life was like before the extinction, and we might even understand what caused it. It also shows us how plants were different back then from those we are used to now.